Kieran Maddox hadn't danced in over 7 years, not since his wife died, but tonight, under a sky strung with fairy lights and the buzz of wedding laughter, he found himself holding out his hand to a woman who looked like she wanted to bolt. "I'm not great at this," she said, voice soft, eyes flicking nervously around the dance floor. He offered her a crooked smile. "Neither am I, but we'll survive one song, right?" She hesitated, then nodded, placing her hand in his like it cost her something. Her fingers were cold, her movements stiff. Kieran led her into a slow sway, trying his best not to step on her toes. "I'm Kieran," he said, gently steering her away from a kid racing past them in a tux far too big for his body. She looked up at him, eyes a warm, uncertain brown. "Savannah." "Savannah Ellis," he nodded. "You with the bride or the groom?" "The bride. We went to college together." "You." "Groom's cousin. Plus, I'm on flower duty," he said, tilting his chin toward a 7-year-old boy sitting at a nearby table with frosting on his face and a paper crown on his head. Savannah's lips twitched. "He yours? Graham, my son, my whole world, really." Kieran's tone shifted without meaning to, and he glanced over to check on the boy. Graham waved enthusiastically, mouth full of cake. "He's adorable," Savannah said. "He's a menace," Kieran replied, fondness thick in his voice. "But yeah, he's mine." They danced in silence for a few beats, the distant chatter and clinking of glasses filling the air. Savannah's body slowly relaxed, her steps beginning to match his. "You're not from around here," he guessed. She tilted her head. "What gave it away? You're dressed like New York, but you keep looking around like you expect the ceiling to fall in." Savannah laughed, breathy and surprised. "I haven't been to a wedding in years. And I didn't know I'd be dragged onto the dance floor by a stranger." "Well," Kieran said, "you technically walked onto it with me." Her eyes met his, a flicker of something soft passing between them. The song ended, but they didn't move. "Do you want to?" Kieran started. "I should probably," Savannah cut in at the same time. They both paused, then laughed awkwardly. "You first," she said. "I was just going to ask if you wanted to sit down, maybe have a drink." Savannah hesitated again. "Okay, yeah. That'd be nice." They found a quiet table near the fire pit, far enough from the music to hear each other. A waiter passed, and Kieran ordered 2 lemonades he didn't drink anymore, not with Graham depending on him. Savannah took a sip, then glanced over at his son. "He's so happy?" "Yeah," Kieran said, watching his boy try to balance a spoon on his nose. "He doesn't know we're broke, or that I took this gig just to cover rent this month." Savannah blinked. "Gig? I'm a mechanic, got laid off last fall, been picking up freelance stuff ever since. The groom paid me to help set up the venue, and to keep Graham entertained during the reception." "And you still found time to dance with a socially awkward stranger?" she asked, smiling gently. Kieran shrugged. "You looked like you needed a break." Savannah looked down, twisting the edge of her napkin. "I did." She didn't say more, and Kieran didn't push. Instead, he turned to watch Graham trying to convince the DJ to play Uptown Funk again for the 4th time. "Tell me something real," Savannah said suddenly, surprising him. He looked at her. "Like what? Something you wouldn't normally say at a wedding." Kieran thought for a moment. "All right, I haven't been on a date in 8 years. I don't even know what I'm doing when I talk to you. But I'm glad I asked you to dance." Savannah blinked, startled. Then she smiled, wide and real this time. "Okay, my turn." Kieran waited. "I didn't come here to see the bride. I mean, I know her, but I wasn't planning to come at all. I've been hiding out in my hotel for the last 3 days." "Why?" Savannah's eyes flicked away. "I'm not good at people or parties or weddings." "Well," Kieran said, "you're doing fine with me." She looked at him, and something in her eyes shifted. The night wore on. They talked. They laughed. Graham eventually crawled into Kieran's lap, tired and sticky, and dozed off with his head on his dad's shoulder. Savannah reached over and gently brushed frosting off the boy's cheek without thinking. Her hand lingered for a second. "You're doing a good job," she said, barely above a whisper. Kieran's chest tightened. It had been so long since someone told him that. "Thanks," he said, voice gruff. "Sometimes I'm just trying to keep us above water." Savannah hesitated, then said, "I know what that feels like." He looked at her. "Do you?" She nodded, then stood. "I should go." Kieran stood too, gently shifting Graham so he could carry him. "Will I see you again?" he asked, surprising himself. Savannah hesitated. "Maybe." Then she turned and walked away toward the valet. Kieran watched her go, heart pounding for reasons he didn't understand. He didn't know her last name. He didn't know where she lived. He didn't know that Savannah Ellis had just left in a Blacktown car, headed to a private estate 1 hour outside the city, or that she was a millionaire, and that she hadn't stopped thinking about him for 1 second since he asked her to dance. Savannah Ellis sat motionless in the back seat of the town car, the world blurring past her window, hills, trees, streetlights all reduced to streaks of gold and forest green. Her driver, Bernard, didn't speak. He'd worked for her family since she was a teenager, and he'd learned long ago that silence was more useful than conversation when Savannah got that look in her eyes. She didn't notice the turn through the wrought iron gates or the crunch of gravel beneath the tires until the car stopped in front of the ivy-wrapped house she hadn't wanted to come back to. Not tonight, not with Kieran's voice still echoing in her head. "Miss Savannah." Bernard opened the door, his white-gloved hand steady as ever. She stepped out, her heels clicking softly on the stone path. "Can you watch for any packages tomorrow morning?" Of course. She didn't wait for further formality. Instead, she walked through the front door of the estate and turned off her phone before she even reached the grand staircase. The house was too quiet. It always was. Savannah went straight to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water, her fingers trembling slightly as she leaned against the marble counter. The whole place felt like a museum, cold, beautiful, and entirely impersonal. Her parents were in Europe, as usual. Her brother was somewhere in Tokyo chasing his next tech acquisition. That left Savannah alone in the house that still smelled faintly of lemon polish and the gardenias her mother insisted on. She set the glass down and pressed her palms against the counter, trying to slow her pulse. She had danced with a stranger, a man who had nothing to do with her world, a man with calloused hands and tired eyes, and a little boy who clung to his shoulder like it was the safest place on earth, and now she couldn't stop thinking about him. The next morning, Savannah showed up at the community center 2 towns over, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt that didn't cost more than $50. It wasn't exactly camouflage, but it was the closest to blending in she could manage. She'd told herself she was volunteering again because she'd been meaning to. Because it was a good thing to do, not because she heard Kieran mention he sometimes dropped Graham off here during the day. Inside, a woman with cropped gray hair and a clipboard greeted her with a wide smile. "Savannah Ellis, right?" "Yes, I emailed about helping with the reading program. Perfect timing. We're short on hands this week. Come on in. The kids are working on sound out stories, and you'll have a small group." Savannah followed her into a bright, slightly chaotic classroom filled with tiny chairs, plastic bins of books, and the smell of dry erase markers. She barely had time to find her footing when a familiar voice called out from the hallway. "Graham, buddy, you've got to keep your shoes on. I can't keep chasing you down barefoot." Kieran appeared in the doorway, crouched down, lacing his son's sneaker while the boy wiggled restlessly. Savannah froze. Kieran looked up and blinked. The pause was less than a second, but something shifted in his face. "You're here," he said slowly, standing. "I volunteer sometimes," Savannah said quickly, her voice a little higher than normal. Kieran nodded. "Didn't expect to see you again." "I wasn't sure I'd see you either." Graham looked between them, then tugged on his dad's hand. "Is she gonna help with the books?" "Looks like it," Kieran said, his gaze still on her. Savannah crouched to Graham's level. "I'm Savannah." "Do you like stories?" The boy nodded. "Only the ones with pirates or dinosaurs." "I think I can work with that," she said, smiling. "I'll be back to pick him up at 2, Kieran said, straightening again. "You okay with me leaving him here?" Savannah looked up. "I think he's in good hands." Kieran hesitated, then nodded once and left without another word. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of finger paints, alphabet cards, and Graham's nonstop commentary about which dinosaurs could win in a fight. Savannah found herself laughing more than she had in weeks, genuinely amused by the boy's wild imagination and the way he insisted she give each T-Rex a different voice. After the session ended, she helped the kids clean up, then stepped out into the hallway just as Kieran was arriving. "You survived," he said, eyeing the streak of green marker on her cheek. "Barely. Your son made me name 5 different pterodactyls. That sounds like him. They walked together toward the parking lot, Graham skipping ahead, hopping between sidewalk cracks like they were lava. Savannah glanced sideways. Are you still doing work at the wedding venue? Finished yesterday, he said, just in time to be unemployed again. She stopped walking. Do you want something more permanent? Kieran shrugged. I want stability for him. For me, doesn't have to be glamorous. Just enough to keep us housed and fed. Savannah hesitated. I might know someone looking to hire. That got his attention. Doing what? Property maintenance. A friend of mine recently inherited a few rentals. Needs someone to manage repairs and logistics. It's steady work. Kieran narrowed his eyes, and this friend happens to trust strangers. She trusts me. He studied her for a long moment. Why are you helping me? Because you helped me, Savannah said, at the wedding. You didn't know me, but you saw I was unraveling and you pulled me into something kind. That matters. Kieran's expression softened. You don't owe me anything. I know, she said, but I still want to help. He nodded slowly. All right. Give your friend my number. I will. Graham ran up then, waving a drawing in the air. Look, I made you a dinosaur. Savannah took the paper, her heart twisting at the clumsy crayon lines. I love it. She's cool, Graham said to his dad. Can she come to the park with us? Kieran glanced at Savannah. Got any plans? She didn't. They went to the park. Graham ran wild while Savannah and Kieran sat on a bench watching him from a distance. I haven't done this in a long time, she admitted. What, sat on a bench? No, just let myself be around people without pretending I'm okay. Kieran looked at her, really looked. You don't have to pretend with me. She turned toward him, her voice quiet. You say that like it's easy. It's not. But it gets easier when someone else is willing to meet you halfway. She didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. As the sun dipped lower, casting gold across the park, Graham ran back, breathless. Can we get pizza? Kieran winced. I don't have the budget for pizza tonight, bud. Savannah stood. My treat. You don't have to, I want to. She didn't wait for permission. Instead, she took Graham's hand and started walking toward the car. Kieran followed, something unreadable in his eyes. Later, at the small pizzeria tucked between a laundromat and a florist, Savannah sat between Kieran and his son, listening to Graham explain why every pizza should come with gummy bears on top. She laughed more than she should have. Kieran watched her, thoughtful. He still didn't know who she was, but he was starting to understand something else entirely. She wasn't just passing through, and neither of them were walking away untouched. Kieran adjusted the wrench in his hand and leaned deeper under the sink, flicking his flashlight toward the leak that just wouldn't quit. The property owner had texted him earlier that morning about this tenant's busted pipe, and Savannah had arranged the job without fanfare. He hadn't expected to be back in the same apartment complex 2 days in a row, but here he was, door open, tool belt tight, and knees on cold tile. Found the source, he called over his shoulder, voice echoing in the small kitchen. It's the compression fitting. Probably wasn't installed right in the first place. A middle-aged woman in slippers hovered near the door. Can it be fixed today? Already on it, Kieran said, tightening the fitting with a firm twist. Should hold. If it doesn't, I'll come back tomorrow. No charge. The woman gave him a grateful look before stepping out to call her grandson inside. Kieran packed up his tools and wiped his hands on a rag. He was about to head out when he saw Savannah standing just outside the building, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding her eyes. You stalking me now? He asked, stepping into the sunlight. I brought you lunch, she said, lifting a brown paper bag. And I wanted to make sure the sink didn't explode again. Kieran raised an eyebrow. How'd you know I was here? I sent the work order, she said. It's my friend's building, remember. He took the bag from her, the smell of roasted chicken and warm bread hitting his nose. You didn't have to. I know, she said, then sat down on the low brick wall bordering the walkway. But I figured you probably hadn't eaten. And Graham's in school, so you can't use him as an excuse to skip lunch. Kieran sat beside her. You're not what I expected. Savannah glanced at him. What did you expect? He shrugged. I don't know. Someone who disappears after one night. Someone who's just passing through. I almost did, she admitted. But then you gave me a reason not to. Kieran opened the bag and took out a sandwich, then offered her the second one. She shook her head. You really grew up around here? He asked. No, she said, watching a dog chase a bird across the parking lot. I grew up in Connecticut, boarding schools, tutors. I transferred here for college and never left. Why stay? I needed distance from family, expectations. From a life that told me I had to be someone I didn't even like. He took a bite of his sandwich, chewing slowly. Must have been nice, though, all that money. Savannah turned toward him, her voice flat. It wasn't mine, not really. It came with strings. With rules, still does. Yeah, she said. But lately I've been cutting them one by one. Kieran leaned back, elbows resting on the wall behind him. You're not what I expected either. How so? You're the first person who's seen me for more than what I've lost. Savannah was quiet for a moment. What did you lose? He studied the sky for a beat before answering. My wife, Graham's mom, cancer, fast, unfair. We were kids, really. 24 and terrified. She passed before he turned 2. Savannah's breath caught. I'm sorry. I've been doing okay, he said, but some days still feel like walking through smoke. You think you've made it out, then you choke on the air. She didn't say anything, just reached over and gently touched his wrist. Kieran looked at her hand, then back up. Why are you really here, Savannah? Her lips pressed together. Because I don't want to keep pretending I don't care. He tilted his head. About what? About you. About how I feel when you look at me like I matter. Kieran's throat tightened. This woman, this beautiful, unpredictable woman, was slowly becoming the most unexpected part of his life. I don't have much to offer, he said quietly. Savannah stood and looked down at him. Maybe I'm not looking for much, maybe I just want something real. They didn't talk again until the sun started dipping behind the buildings. Later that week, Savannah slipped into the back of the community center just as the kids were packing up their reading materials. Graham spotted her first and ran up, arms spread like an airplane. You came back. I said I would, she said, crouching. Did you finish the pirate book? Twice, he said proudly. Now we're on mummies. Terrifying, she whispered, making him giggle. Kieran stepped out from the hallway, wiping his hands on a towel. You're early. I figured you'd be here, she said. You're right. They walked out together, Graham skipping ahead again, this time with a paper crown made of construction paper and glitter stuck in his curls. You doing anything tonight? She asked. Kieran shook his head. Just making dinner, nothing fancy. Soup and grilled cheese. Savannah hesitated. Do you want some company? He looked at her. You sure? I'm sure. They drove back to his place, a small duplex tucked behind a grocery store and a gas station. The porch light flickered when he unlocked the door, and the screen creaked on its hinges. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon and soap, the kind of scent that came from someone trying to make a space feel like home. Graham immediately threw himself onto the couch with a stack of picture books, and Kieran moved to the kitchen, pulling bread from the freezer and soup from the pantry. Savannah stood awkwardly near the counter for a moment before stepping in to help. You chop, I stir, she said. Kieran handed her a cutting board. You know your way around a kitchen. I've had to learn, she said. Can't live on takeout forever. They worked side by side, laughing over burnt toast and arguing about whether soup should be chunky or smooth. Graham chimed in from the living room with increasingly ridiculous requests: gummy bears in the soup, marshmallows on the sandwich. When they finally sat down to eat, the lights flickered once, then steadied. This place has charm, Savannah said. Kieran gave a half smile. It's not much, it's honest, she said. I like that. After dinner, Graham fell asleep on the couch with a blanket over his legs and a toy car clutched in one hand. Savannah turned to Kieran. This is the part where I should probably go. You don't have to, she looked at him. If I stay, things will change. Kieran stepped closer, his voice low. Maybe they already have. Savannah's heart beat faster. You don't know everything about me. Then tell me. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her fingers curled at her sides. I want to, but not here. Not now, he didn't push. When you're ready. Savannah nodded once, then leaned in and kissed him soft, tentative, but real. When she pulled back, Kieran's eyes were searching hers. Can I see you tomorrow? He asked. Yes, she said. But next time, you're eating something that doesn't come from a can. He laughed, quiet and warm. Deal. She grabbed her coat, glanced once more at the sleeping boy on the couch, then slipped out into the night. Kieran watched the door after she left, heart full of something unfamiliar, hope. He didn't know her secrets yet, But he knew one thing with certainty. She wasn't just someone passing through, she was already rewriting the shape of his world. Savannah sat in the backseat of the town car, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as the driver turned onto the long gravel drive leading to her family's estate. The trees arched overhead like a tunnel of judgment, and the house beyond glowed with the kind of old money elegance that had once felt like armor but now felt like a trap. She hadn't planned on coming here tonight. But her mother had summoned her with a simple message relayed by the estate manager. Your presence is expected. Inside, the drawing room smelled faintly of jasmine and waxed floors. Her mother stood near the fireplace, holding a crystal glass of white wine, dressed in a navy jacket that probably cost more than Savannah's entire car. You're late, her mother said without looking up. Savannah crossed the room slowly. I wasn't planning to come. You never are. And yet here you are. Savannah didn't bother responding. She waited. Her mother finally turned. I saw your name on the tax documents for the Blackwood property. You bought it. I did. That doesn't make sense. You never cared about real estate. Savannah met her eyes. I'm not doing it for the money. Her mother's expression didn't change, but her voice cooled. You're spending your inheritance on sentimental nonsense. Savannah's jaw tightened. I'm spending my money on something that matters to me. Her mother stepped closer, glass still in hand. You think playing landlord to a handful of middle-income tenants is going to give your life meaning? No, but helping someone who deserves a chance might. There was a pause. This is about a man, isn't it? Her mother asked, voice sharper now. Is that what this is? Savannah didn't flinch. His name is Kieran. He's raising his son alone. He works harder than anyone I've ever met, and he's worth more than any of the people in this house tonight. Her mother took a slow sip of wine. You sound like a servant in a Victorian novel. I sound like someone who's finally making her own choices. You're throwing away everything we built. No, Savannah said. I'm stepping away from it. Her mother's voice dropped, soft and cutting. You're not like them. Savannah's throat tightened. Maybe I don't want to be. She didn't stay long after that. Later that night, she stood outside Kieran's duplex, uncertain for the first time in days. The porch light was out again, the screen door slightly ajar. She knocked once, then stepped back. Kieran answered barefoot, a dish towel slung over his shoulder. I didn't know if you'd come, he said. I wasn't sure either. He moved aside, letting her in. The living room was quiet, lit only by the faint glow of a lava lamp in the corner and the flicker of a muted cartoon on the television. Graham was asleep on the couch, clutching a dinosaur plush with one sock half off his foot. A babysitter, a young woman with headphones in, gave Savannah a nod from the armchair before gathering her things quietly and slipping out. Kieran turned to her once they were alone. You okay? No, Savannah admitted. But I will be. She walked into the kitchen, pulled out 2 mugs and poured them both water from the sink. Kieran leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching her. I told my mother about you. His brow rose. I'm guessing she didn't throw confetti. She called you a phase. Kieran's jaw tensed. And what did you say? I told her you were the only thing that feels real in my life right now. He moved closer. You mean that? I don't say things I don't mean. There was a long pause before he stepped forward and took her hand. I've been trying not to ask, he said. But I need to know, who are you really? Savannah looked up at him. I'm someone who was born into more money than she ever wanted, someone who's spent most of her life trying to figure out what she actually cares about. And right now, I care about you. Kieran let out a slow breath. I can't give you anything glamorous. I don't have a savings account. I don't have stability. I've got this duplex, my kid, and a toolbox that barely fits in my trunk. I don't want glamorous, I want honest. He studied her face. You're not scared of how different our worlds are. I've lived in mine long enough to know it's not worth what people think. Kieran looked at her for a long moment before brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I don't know how this is supposed to work. We figure it out. One day at a time. The next morning, they drove out of town with Graham buckled in the backseat, chattering about lizards and volcanoes. Savannah had a plan, one she hadn't told Kieran about yet. They pulled up to a small property surrounded by open fields and quiet roads. A white sign out front read, "For sale by owner." Kieran frowned. What is this place? Savannah stepped out. It's yours if you want it. He followed her, brow furrowed. What do you mean? She handed him a key. It's an old auto garage, been closed for years, needs work. But the structure's sound, and there's an apartment upstairs. Kieran stared at the building. You bought this. I had some help from a friend who believes in second chances. Why? Because you deserve more than scraping by. You deserve a place you can build something from. He turned slowly toward her. I can't accept this. You can, she said, and you will because this isn't charity, it's a partnership. He stepped closer. And what does this partnership look like? Messy, complicated, but full of things that matter. He let out a slow breath, then looked at the key in his hand. Graham ran past them toward the garage, yelling, Can we paint it green? Kieran laughed, the sound raw and genuine. I guess we're painting it green. That night, they stood on the roof of the duplex with a string of fairy lights wrapped haphazardly around two lawn chairs. Graham slept inside, and the moon hung heavy above them. Kieran turned to her. I don't know how we got here. You asked me to dance. And you said yes. Savannah reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Kieran took it, unfolding it carefully. It was a drawing, one of Graham's. A stick-figure man, a woman with long hair, and a tiny boy between them. At the top, in bright red crayon, my family. Kieran blinked once hard. He did this. He gave it to me last week. Said it was a secret. Kieran looked at her, voice thick. You sure you're ready for this? I've never been more sure of anything. He pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest as the lights blinked above them. The city stretched far beyond the rooftops. 1,000 stories unfolding every second but this one. This quiet, impossible one between a struggling dad and a woman who'd lived her whole life in the wrong world, had finally found its rhythm. They stayed like that for a long time. And when the sun rose the next morning, casting gold across the roof, and through the windows of the home they were slowly building together, it didn't just feel like a new day. It felt like the beginning of everything. Rain drizzled in a light mist. As Savannah walked up the path to the garage, the one Kieran had spent the past 6 weeks transforming. The metal roll-up door gleamed with a fresh coat of hunter green paint, and the old concrete sidewalk had been edged with square planters filled with wildflowers Graham insisted on planting himself. She stepped carefully over a small plastic dump truck left near the curb and knocked twice on the side entrance. The door creaked open. Kieran stood there in worn jeans and a black t-shirt, hands streaked with oil, eyes alert. You're early, he said, stepping aside. You sound surprised, Savannah replied, brushing raindrops from her coat. I figured a woman with your schedule wouldn't have time to waste on a ramshackle garage. I've got time, and it's not ramshackle anymore. Inside, the space was unrecognizable. Where there had once been dust and rusted shelves, there was now a polished workbench, tool cabinets mounted securely along the wall, and a custom-built lift in the center of the floor. But what caught her attention most was the framed drawing hanging near the desk, Graham's dinosaur artwork, now mounted with pride. You framed it, she said quietly. Kieran wiped his hands and looked over. He insisted, said it was the shop's mascot. She smiled, then stepped closer. You've done all of this in 6 weeks? Not alone. I hired a couple guys local, good with their hands, gave them a fair wage. One of them's just out of high school, trying to stay out of trouble. Sounds like someone I used to know, she said. Kieran gave a small laugh, then leaned against the work table. Savannah, can I ask you something? You usually do. You've been here every day since the keys changed hands. You've helped build shelves, painted walls, even brought lunch when it rained. But you never talk about what happens after this. She met his gaze carefully. You mean after the shop opens? No, he said. After we stop pretending this isn't real. There was a long silence. I've been offered a position, she said finally. A nonprofit board in Boston. It's a good cause. Education for underserved youth. It's something I care about. His face was unreadable. And you're thinking of taking it. I was. He nodded once and turned away, reaching for a wrench that didn't need adjusting. But then I realized something, she added. Kieran didn't look up. I've spent most of my life trying to prove I could do something important, something that mattered outside of my family's shadow. And this doesn't count, he asked, voice tight. It counts more than anything. Because this time I didn't do it to prove anything. I did it because I wanted to see you win. Now he looked at her. I'm not going to Boston, she said. I already found where I belong. He stepped forward slowly, as if afraid she might change her mind. You're sure? I've never been more, Kieran exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders. He reached up and touched her face with careful fingers. I don't want to lose you, he said. You won't, she whispered. You never did. He kissed her then, slow and steady, the kind of kiss that didn't burn it built, and when they pulled apart, something had shifted between them. Not a beginning, not an ending. Just certainty. Later that week, the garage opened quietly, no ribbon cutting, no press release, just a hand-painted sign that read Maddox Auto and Repairs. The first client was an elderly woman with a leaky radiator. The second, a young couple with a stroller and a flat tire. Word spread fast. Savannah stood behind the counter in the modest front office, typing invoices and sipping coffee from a chipped mug. Graham sat on a stool beside her, coloring a jetpack onto a stick-figure version of Kieran. I made him fly into outer space, he announced, waving the drawing. Make sure he has a helmet, Savannah said, smiling. The bell above the door chimed and Kieran walked in, pulling off his gloves. Busy day, he said. You're booked out for 3 weeks, she said. I'd call that a success. He leaned against the counter. You still sure about all this? Savannah looked around, the humming of tools in the back, Graham's laughter, the faint smell of oil and fresh paper. I've never been more sure about anything in my life. That weekend, they took a rare break and drove up to the lake, a quiet spot an hour out of town, where the water was still, and the air carried the scent of pine and summer grass. Graham raced ahead along the narrow path, carrying a bucket in hopes of catching frogs. Savannah and Kieran walked behind him, fingers entwined. Have you thought about what comes next? He asked. I think we're already in it, she said. He stopped beside her, pulled her close. Then maybe it's time. For what? He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. Not velvet, not engraved, just simple cardboard like the kind used to ship spark plugs. You're not serious. I've never been more, he said, echoing her words. She opened the box. Inside was a silver band, thin and elegant, with a tiny engraving on the inside. For the woman who made it real, Savannah's breath caught. I can't give you a castle, he said, but I can give you every part of me, every day, every night, a life that's honest, a home that's full. If you want it. She looked up, eyes bright with something unspoken. I do. They didn't wait long. The ceremony was small, just a few chairs set up behind the garage, wildflowers in mason jars, and Graham in a bow tie too big for his neck. Kieran wore a clean button-down shirt. Savannah wore a pale blue dress with her hair down, no veil, no pretense. Graham stood proudly between them, holding the rings. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, he shouted, I don't. They laughed, and then they kissed, and then they were a family. Later, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the laughter faded into quiet music, Savannah leaned her head on Kieran's shoulder. Did you ever think we'd end up here? She asked. He kissed her temple. No. But I'm glad we did. They watched Graham chase fireflies across the yard, his laughter echoing into the twilight. The stars blinked on, one by one, and for the first time in both their lives, the future didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like something they'd built together. And it was just beginning.